Today we're going to take a look at the Santa Fe Independent School District versus Doe case. And to further understand this case, we have to take a look at the U.S. Constitution, primarily the First Amendment, which protects our freedom of religion and freedom of speech. And within this amendment, there is an establishment clause. And this establishment clause prohibits two things. First, the establishment of a national religion, and second, the preference of one religion over another. And if we move into where this took place, we are in Santa Fe, Texas, a small rural community south of Houston. This community was deep rooted in what they and traditions they had. And the year is 1995, and so these traditions were very common in many Southern communities. And one of these traditions was to have a student-elected chaplain deliver a prayer to the attendees of a football game. It was said over the school's loudspeaker and showed the school's promotion of religion, which was found offensive by 2 Catholic and 1 Mormon students and their mothers, and found that they decided to sue the school on the grounds that this was a violation of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. These individuals decided that they wanted to remain anonymous, and so they decided to file under the name Doe. And so as we move forward and look at this case, they are referred to as Doe. So in response to this this suit, the school decides it wants to opt to change its policy on student-led prayer. And so they decide to have 2 student elections. The first determines whether the students want invocations and if they should be allowed at the games. If this was a majority yes, there was a second election where they would then vote on a person they wanted to be their spokesperson and wanted to say and read their prayers. And the district court, when this case, after it was done pending, it went to court, decided they accepted this change as long as the policy was modified to include non-sectarian and non-proselyting prayers. Now, this ruling stood for about a year, and they continued to have football games that were considered football game prayers that were non-sectarian and non-proselyting. However, the Does decided they wanted to appeal this as they still thought it was a violation of their First Amendment rights. And so they decided to take it to the Court of Appeals in the Fifth Circuit. And the Court of Appeals sided with the Does in the fact that the words non-proselyting and non-sectarian should not be necessary. This was still a violation of the Establishment Clause. And as this case was gaining speed and getting larger and seeing a larger view, it then was decided that it was going to be taken to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court looked at one legal question. And the question was, does student-led and student-initiated prayers at public school football games violate the Establishment Clause? And when this case was seen in the Supreme Court, there was a 6-3 ruling that the words non-sectarian and non-proselyting were constitutionally necessary, but yet still ruled that student-led prayers were not acceptable at football games and were only acceptable at graduation. And this decision was made on the basis of 2 cases. The first was the Lemon versus Kurtzman case in 1971. This case was concerning some biased salary reimbursements to religious officials, and it was ruled in favor of the taxpayers that there was excessive in government entanglement with a religion. The second case was the Lee versus Wiseman case, where a student came forward about it as violating the Establishment Clause during a prayer given by a rabbi at a middle school graduation. And it was ruled as a violation, and they ruled it pervasive, the prayer pervasive. And as we look at the rulings and what was said, the 6-3 decision. So the majority vote was given. There was a quote by one of the Supreme Court justices, John Paul Stevens, and he says, the delivery of such a message over school's public address system by a speaker representing the student body under supervision of school faculty, the pursuant to a school policy, the explicitly and implicitly encouraged public prayer is not properly characterized as private speech. And this opinion was then opposite by the minority opinion, and Justice William Rehnquist discusses how he believes that this ruling was he recalls George Washington himself, in that he requests when Congress passed the Bill of Rights that it was they needed to signal favor to the Almighty God. And so, as we look at how this case then affected the world, we then go into something that happened about a year later in Hendersonville, North Carolina, where there was a riot of "We Still Pray," and they flooded the school with large amounts of people and were rioting. The next case happened in 2019, where West Des Moines, Iowa School District, was sued for having their football players take part in a prayer prior, and students were feeling uncomfortable. And so this case was ruled into it. This image represents my experience with this. When I went to the College of Southern Idaho in Twin Falls, there was a student-led prayer at the rodeo, which we see as a violation of this, but is still happening in our lives today, which is something that I think is crazy. And as if we look at our own president right now, in January, he endorsed that the schools need to have religion put back into them, which has seen a lot of backlash, as it's not non-partial. It's endorsing only certain religions and is causing upheaval in our country. And so I think if we look at this case and how it affects ours, it's the separation of church and state. We need to realize that the schools that we participate in, that are public schools, are public entities. And so this decision rules on that basis. And that is what this court case has done in making history as we go forward.